Hey, Mark here. So these episodes originally were released on Deep Blue Sea, the podcast, but I love these episodes. I love talking with Jay about movies that either are directed by Rennie Harlin or they feature aquatic sea beasts. I mean, they're some of my favorite conversations. Also, we've brought in some A-plus guests, and we just had a great time talking about these movies on Deep Blue Sea, the podcast. So I figured if you haven't listened to these yet, I would include them as a bonus episode on Movies, Films, and Flicks because I just enjoy the conversations. I think they're worth listening to, and I think you're going to like them. So after you listen to these episodes, if you dig them, go check out Deep Blue Sea, the podcast, or just look out for more. And thanks once again for listening to Movies, Films, and Flakes. I really do appreciate it. There's like 2.7 million podcasts out there, and I'm honored that you spend the time listening to Movies, Films, and Flakes. So enjoy this. If you like it, make sure to go to Deep Blue Sea, the podcast, and check out all of our episodes, which break down Deep Blue Sea 1, 2, and 3. They're insane. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Deep Blue Sea, the podcast. I am Mark Jellyfish Hoffmeyer.
And I am Jay Seagull on a surfboard Cluett. And today this is our season 4, episode 1 of season 4. We haven't really got seasons for the podcast, but unofficially season 4. We have finished all of the Deep Blue Sea films, all 3 of them, to date, chapter by chapter. That's all done. You can go back in time and go back in our feed and listen to it. If you can go back in time, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if you can go back in time, let us know too. Yeah.
Unless you're going back to steal our idea and do this podcast before us, in which case don't do that. We did it.
Yeah, don't.
That's mean.
Don't. Or Shallows Minute. Don't. Well, you can do a Shallows Minute. This movie deserves it. Yeah.
It does. Well, I mean, I don't know if I would do it the Shallows Minute, but we'll get there.
If you're going back in time, listen to the Sugar Babes. And some Ben Folds, hang out with Bill Nighy, and then go on a shark cruise in South Africa with Bill Nighy.
I mean, you could do all of those things today, but okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're talking about, we've moved on from the Deep Blue Sea franchise chapter by chapter. We're now on to Deep Blue Sea adjacent films as part of an education of me who has not seen a lot of Deep Blue Sea adjacent films. These are films that heavily feature sharks or aquatic monsters or are directed by Rennie Harlin or have some other connection to Deep Blue Sea in some manner. And we are starting with The Shallows, as you already know because you've started playing this podcast and it's the title of the podcast.
What?
I'm sorry to surprise you. So what is The Shallows? Well, let me tell you, it's mainly when I say to people that I do a shark movie podcast, the first response I get back is, "Oh, what did you think of The Shallows?" And I was like, "I haven't seen it." Is the response I can now stop using because I have now seen it. It was released in
finally after a year of me babbling on about it.
Over a year.
Or years of me babbling on about it.
So it was released in 2016, directed by Jaume Collet-Serra. Apologies if that is
Jaume. I listened to it beforehand.
Thank you. I should have done, but I ran out of time. Jaume, so that's on me. So the outline of the plot, we will probably get into spoilers during this podcast. But we'll give
100%.
Yeah, we will definitely give him spoilers at some point because I want to at the end because it's awesome. So this stars Blake Lively as a medical school dropout and surfing enthusiast, Nancy. She visits a secret secluded beach in Mexico where her recently deceased mother once visited. And there Nancy encounters a vindictive shark that leaves her stranded not far from shore with just a small rocky outcrop, a buoy or buoy, a whale carcass and some conveniently sharp jewelry at her disposal to try and survive. The general plot. And I gotta say, Mark, I really like this film.
Yes!
I was expecting to. I didn't know much about it other than Blake Lively in The Shallows. And there's a shark of some description. But I really liked it enough. I've watched it twice and then scanned through it a third time today as well. So in the space of a short amount of time, I've watched this 3 times.
It's an 85-minute movie. I mean, it blasts by. This is like just muscular and efficient and just wonderful storytelling. And I'm so happy that we're covering this right after Deep Blue Sea because to me, Jay, this is my 3rd favorite shark film of all time. Okay. It really is.
The box says the best shark movie since Jaws.
Hey now.
Yeah, I was offended before I even put this disc in. That's strong claim.
Well, not according to Rotten Tomatoes, their Versus show.
Yes, indeed.
So it had over, I think, 100,000 views on Facebook, and it's up to over 45,000, maybe 50,000 by the time you listen to this on YouTube. And it was The Shallows versus Deep Blue Sea versus The Meg.
Hang on, I hate to stop you, Mark, but Caitlin's it. Kate's it.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
No problem. Sorry, everyone. Kate McNabb, our fan favourite from the show, is back to help us talk about The Shallows. Kate, welcome. We've just started, don't worry. And we love the film. Mark.
Me too. Yeah, sorry. I can't tell time, or times are weird here, so.
It's international podcasting is always fun.
Yeah, we have 3 different countries going on here right now.
And I'm in a country where we don't do daylight savings, so.
Oh, you're one of the smart countries.
Yes.
Good. Yes. Okay. Well, we're all here now.
Okay, catch me up.
I was just saying. So, Kate, I work for Rotten Tomatoes, and I do the research for this thing called Versus, and it's Scorsese versus Nolan, or Brad Pitt versus DiCaprio, Julia Roberts versus Sandra Bullock, stuff like that. And they just did a second best shark movie of all time, because Jaws is it. Like, you can't. I know Brian Raftery, who was a guest on our show, made a case for Deep Blue Sea being the greatest shark movie of all time, and I really love his logic, and I think it works. But to prevent an argument from everybody, I think it's Jaws, Deep Blue Sea, The Shallows, and they just did an episode to crown the second best shark movie of all time, and Deep Blue Sea won. But while I was doing the research for it, I was thinking to myself, I wouldn't be mad if The Shallows edged out Deep Blue Sea, because it has a higher critical score, it has a higher audience score, it made over $100 million on an R-rated budget, it had a tiny budget, and it's just really, it's 85 minutes and wonderful. So you know a movie's good when I wouldn't have been mad if it beat Deep Blue Sea.
But I do love that they had a video on what's the second best shark movie, and the person that they asked to do the research has a podcast dedicated to one of the options.
Yeah.
And there was no bias in that at all.
I mean, I've been doing the show for like 3 years now, so and by the amount of people who have watched it, and they promoted Deep Blue Sea, the podcast, on it. So, but I want to say I'm always objective, and so I researched the heck out of The Shallows. I watched everything. I talked about how the shark is a female, and she has the hook in her, and she's scarred up, and she's just really angry at humans and vindictive. And I figured out the size, all the science behind it. Like, the costume designer in this movie, I don't know if you know this, but the costume designer is Kim Barrett. She worked on Aquaman, Romeo and Juliet in the 90s. She did The Matrix. So Cloud Atlas, she's a Wachowski acolyte. She's done Nice Guys. So you have Speed Racer. So you have one of the, like, I think Jean-May Collet-Serra, he did what? Nonstop, which Commuter, which are really solid thrillers.
It's a film I really enjoyed.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, good director, great costume designer. Blake Lively wanted to do this movie because Ryan Reynolds did Buried, and he loved that experience. So she's kind of on an island in this film, acting by herself. You have Great Seagull.
This is better than Buried.
I just love this movie.
Better than Buried.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely better than Buried.
I like Buried. This is better than Buried. Anyway, we have a guest. Yeah. Kate. Well, so we've established I had never seen The Shallows before. I've now watched it. I really liked it. Mark's seen it before. Really loved it. What's your history with The Shallows? What are you coming from this? Coming to this?
I have also seen it. I've written about it for my blog, the infamous blog I write. I hadn't seen
troublemaker.
it when I was surprised. I hadn't seen it when it first came out. I think I've talked about this before, where I'm always scared to see a new shark movie because they're usually pretty terrible. And so I hadn't seen this one, and all my girlfriends who love shark movies were like, you got to see it. So I finally watched it, and I love it. My first thing here in my notes is I had no notes. And I agree with you, Mark. After Deep Blue Sea, for me, it's the best shark movie, and I would not be upset if somebody said this is the best shark movie after Jaws, because I think it depends on your sort of temperament with shark movies. If you like sort of more, this one is legit scary to me. Like, yeah, I love it. I love so much about this movie. I rewatched it a lot over this last week gearing up to it, but I wrote about it. And for me, when I started the blog, this was 2 years ago that I first wrote about it, it really broke open the canon of shark movies for me. To me, it's another sort of marker in our line of shark movies. You know, I do agree that Jaws is the best shark movie ever, and it sort of starts the canon, even though there's precursors to it. And then Deep Blue Sea is another point, in 1999. And then for me, The Shallows is another big point in the canon, and I think we see that because now there's so many movies trying to emulate The Shallows, and they're all bad. But so yeah, I love it. I love Blake Lively in this movie. I'm not a huge Blake Lively fan in general. Like, don't at me. I love her in A Simple Favor, but I love her.
So good. Henry Golding needs to be in a shark movie.
Yeah, like
I think he's maybe like too big for a shark movie now. He's surpassed it. But I'd love him to be in it. Yeah, Deep Blue Sea.
I mean, I'd be into it. He's easy on the eyes. I'd be into it. But yeah, I think I don't know. I like when I think about shark movies. This to me is sort of in the subgenre that I always joke about, which is like it's not a shark movie. And
I'm gonna have to disagree with you.
Yeah, I know. Well, the director himself, he talks about how it's more of a like survivalist isolation flick, and I totally agree with him on that. And I think because of that, like this movie is not constrained by trying to be Jaws. It doesn't have to do the homages. It doesn't have to build off anything. It's not trying to be super different, even though it is pretty different. It just gets to be a movie. And I think there's some like incidental things that happen with that too. Like Jaws, we don't see the shark for a very long time. And I would argue I don't like CGI. I think the CGI in this is like pretty great.
Yeah. Right? It's like legit.
Like a couple moments where you're like, even then it's fine. I think they did a great job on the CGI, and I think because of that we get this really tense, wonderful movie the same way we do with Jaws in a lot of ways. But like some of those the shark movies that I think about are like 47 Meters Down, the first one, where the director talks about how it's a diver movie, and then you get the other side of the spectrum on that with like a Red Water that like forgets that it's a shark movie and is instead about oil drilling. But yeah, I think like I really love Nancy. I love the character, so much of her, and I love her journey. And I'd be curious to hear how you guys feel about her in general, especially at the beginning, because for me, not to be, I don't know, but as a woman watching her in Mexico driving with a man she doesn't know by herself to a beach that she doesn't know where it is, I talk about this in my blog, like the vacillation between sort of the rape culture feelings that I feel and like the movie is really, really strong. You're like, why are you in this car by yourself? You don't have an out. Your friend is not coming. And then she gets in the water and you can kind of see her. She's talking to these dudes. And when they call her over, she's like, oh, I'm okay. No. And like that protective vibe. And for me, that sort of vacillation between like fun and danger was very interesting, and I know the director didn't really think too much about that, but to me it's interesting that it is there and it's present, and I'm wondering if that's something that you guys maybe picked up on in the first little bit, or how you felt about, because her first part of her journey, seems a little reckless, she's a little bit desperate, a little lost, like she just needs to get to this beach and it doesn't matter how she gets there, she needs to get there for her mom, she's searching for something, obviously, some type of catharsis.
Well, it is something I picked up on as well about with outline that she thinks herself as responsible or reliable, and the Charlie says she's bossy. I expected that to have like more of a thread in the film, like more, because I agree, it felt like she's kind of almost trying to prove herself that she's willing to do this, do these more dangerous or outgoing activities, that she's on her own, but she's still going to go ahead and do it. But the fact that she's going to the beach without her friend, and they're going to meet there, even though they don't know what it's called or how to get there on their own, is a little odd. A little like you feel like you drag her out of bed and say, right, we're going now, and you know before you head off whether she's going to come or not. But I get it. Friends are unreliable. Friends get drunk. The Irish flu is a term I've never heard before for a hangover, so I liked that. And smelling of Dong Julio and bad choices. It's a great description.
I didn't think of it necessarily as her needing to prove herself. It was almost like a tunnel vision. Because clearly, like, I think the narrative to the story you're supposed to understand is that, she's in med school and then her mother has died and she sort of stops believing in medicine, which is a really interesting thing, because I feel like doctors sort of understand that sometimes, death happens, things can't be cured, but it seems to have really rattled her. And, it seems like her dad doesn't even know where she is in the world when she talks to him.
Yeah.
And so, like, I liked this kind of movement for her where at the beginning you're like, this is so dangerous what you're doing. And even when she stays out in the water when the other guys go in and you're like, what are you doing? Like, the sun's going down. This is when sharks attack. Like, I was so mad at the movie, like, not mad in like a good way where you're yelling at the screen because you know something's going to happen, right? Like, you know, this woman will be attacked